Go ahead, Glenn.
Hello, Glenn John, my lead product for AI at Coda. I've been doing that, well, I guess only a couple of years since AI became the thing that we all had to do, but I've been at Coda about 6 years now. So yeah, that's me. You want more of an intro? Is that enough?
No, that's perfect.
Wonderful.
Just got to remember to do them.
Yeah.
John, you want to go?
Hey, folks. I'm John Wang, CTO co-founder at Assembled. We build support operations products. So just been leading the technical and the AI side of the house for the last six and a half, 7 years.
How's it going, folks? I'm Barry Wallace, Senior Director of Business Operations at Intercom. Business operations can mean anything, so think of it as a corporate strategy team, and I've been here for about 6 years.
Thank you. Okay, got that out of the way. Back on track. Love it. So yeah, love it. So ways AI is solving problems today that just simply wasn't possible before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first place we saw it kind of cross the chasm was not in the business space, but it was like students, probably the first early adopters of this tech. And you can see it in the usage charts when school's in and school's out of like how many people are using AI, using it for summarizing all their notes and everything they're doing and writing everything they need to write. And that was kind of a big sort of first mover. When it came to business, I think it did still start in the more technical space. It was engineering, it was product managers, technical product managers. And for those people, really a lot of what it was doing, helping write code, helping to get through all the amounts of documentation they're reading and trying to write all the time, and became this kind of little assistant kind of work with them. And then it's a long, long tail. I think that's what's so interesting about this space right now is just how many use cases, how versatile the technology is, how we're still all finding different ways of using it. And I think really for it to cross the chasm for everyone else, we kind of had to productize more of those things for everyone.
Yeah, and you have Bear, I know you had some kind of comments on that too, or maybe John, maybe like on the LLM side. I know we talked a bit about the ability to synthesize large amounts of data, that kind of broad application, but being able to be used in a lot of specific ways.
Yeah, totally. I think the really interesting thing, because we work in support just like Intercom does, and I would say the areas that I was most surprised for that AI can do now is make decisions. And it used to be the case that support chatbots have existed for a really long time, right? But to make a good support chatbot experience was very, very, very difficult back in the day before LLMs. Now it's a lot easier. And actually being able to, and the reason I think the support experiences can get better, not just for chatbots, but for email and voice and kind of like all of the different channels, is because actually you can get an LLM to go and say, should I give this person a return or a refund? And you can give them a policy and you can say, hey, this is what I should do. And that actually really, really did not exist previously. Or you use like some very bad ML model and that had pretty low precision recall. So I think that's been really, really differentiated now with LLMs.
Any comments, Barry?
We're also in the CS space. So, I mean, a lot of what John just said resonates. The taxonomy that we've kind of applied to, I suppose, queries that we get through our Fin AI chatbot is, or AI agent, I should say, is like we've divided into like informational queries, personalized queries, and then there's actions, and then technical. And it's obviously, you know, the plethora of AI agents that came out with the release of ChatGPT in November 2022 really solved that like kind of first bucket, like the very informational, very easy ones. And I think what Intercom is really focused on is like, okay, let's get to the next level, and we continue to do that. And we're obviously not all the way to the end yet, and that's a multi-year process. But yeah, that's kind of how I think about the evolution of AI agents in this space.
Awesome, thank you. And John, you made some comments specifically around kind of the customer service space, and I think it's always interesting to get specific insights and specific examples of how technology on kind of these like new LLMs are being applied. So can you maybe walk us through a couple of examples from the customer support, customer service space where you're seeing AI solve like a very specific hard business problem that, again, you mentioned the chatbots not being as good before, but what are maybe some of the other ways that people are applying it now?
Yeah, totally. One particular customer that we have, Patreon, they have they have interesting customer support because Patreon, they help creators build content, and they have creators that actually write in to support, and they have patrons that write into support. And historically, Patreon had this really difficult time of differentiating who's a patron and who's a creator. And there's completely different flows for each one of those subsets. And now with what we do at Assembled, they are very, very easily able to differentiate that and also be able to have very specific answers to those questions, which, you know, old style AI had a very, very hard time doing. Same actually with Etsy is another one of our customers where they have very specific types of inquiries because they're a marketplace. They have sellers and they have buyers, and the types of actions you take are very, very different. So being able to really understand who's writing in, while it may seem very basic, it actually cuts your or increases your quality tremendously when you can do that.
I feel like this is something we've heard before, which is that one of the key differences between kind of like this generation of models and previous models is that ability to like infer things and understand things in a much more human-like way, as opposed to having to just set very hard rules on what is happening and when. It's not just a decision tree anymore. It's not just a hard set pathway. It's actually the tool itself, the LLM itself can go through and make those decisions. And so even if somebody does something wrong, it doesn't break the system, kind of take it over from there. And I think the customer support space is a clear one, but I know that there's very similar examples in a lot of other kind of industries as well.
Yeah, and I think like Intercom does something very similar where when we think about a inquiry that comes in, we try to extract as much metadata as possible, right? Because if you just try to throw, inquiry comes in, try to do a RAG response, it'll get the answer right some percentage of the time, maybe 60 to 80%, depends on what kind of articles you have in there. But if you can actually extract all of the relevant pieces of information and add that to your response, you get way, way better quality and results.
I just want to say, like, it's a double-edged sword, though, right? Like, so we thought about like customer support buyers as being quite conservative, and while that's true, we kind of use it in a disparaging way, and we learned that was the wrong way to think about it. Yes, they're conservative, but it's not that they are not open to new technology. They're very early adopters. It's just that anything that they put in front of a customer is like a massive, massive decision and can have a huge impact on their business. And so when you start talking about like AI, where it is not deterministic, where they don't have absolute control over the outcome, it's a very scary decision. And we've all heard about hallucinations. Like that is something we need to educate our customers on. So yes, having that flexibility, the very nature of LLMs, having that flexibility is a positive. It's also like something we very much need to educate from a customer service perspective our customers on.
Oh.
Sorry.
Thank you. Love the engagement. Thank you. No, that's a great call out, and I think from like there's a lot of use cases that are more internal facing. It's more supporting internal teammates. I use AI all the time in my role, technical teammates. But even when you think about deploying code, right? Like a lot of times people still want to have a human on it, and I think certain industries having that customer facing aspect to it, there's a bit more. There's like higher stakes. Things are on the line. So a lot of it kind of comes down to like, yes, we get it. We see the value in this, but we're not necessarily sure that we are confident in it. And there's going to be an educational period for people to understand, like, no, it does work, getting to that kind of like aha moment, that wow moment of, oh, it works. We can trust this now. And then not only educating our customers, but their end customers as well. Kind of a follow-up on that, John. And then got a couple of questions for Glenn as well. We started to dabble in this, but in your space, is the apprehension typically around not understanding the technology? Is it around past issues that they've seen with previous technologies? Is it simply the higher stakes? Like, what do you typically see as the reasons why customers might be more apprehensive? And then maybe comparing that to the ones who are adopting it quickly and seeing success, like what are the mindsets that are different there?
Yeah, it's a multifaceted question. And I would say that actually, it depends on if you're talking very enterprise customers or you're talking mid-market or you're talking SMB customers, right? SMB customers, if they're not adopting the AI, it might just be because the value's not that high. Sometimes the value is really high, but often we've talked to a lot of SMB customers and their support is highly, highly technical. You really, really need to know everything that's going on. And there's really no automations that can get around that. And you'll have one support person. If you're talking mid-market, actually, yeah, a lot of it is these hallucinations. People are scared. They don't want to bring this in. And then I think the enterprise is maybe like 10x that version, like 10x, right? It's like, well, I could lose my job if I have I think there's some airline back in the back in 2023, I forget which one, but they had a chatbot that went way off the rails. That person probably lost their job, right? You really don't want to be the C-level or VP that is doing that. So I think people at the enterprise level have really tried to adopt Copilot as opposed to having customer-facing things. I don't know if you all see the same thing, but they've been a lot more slower to adopt because of that.
And Glenn, I'd love to hear from your perspective too, because I know, again, you guys service so many different types of industries and customers and personas and jobs. Are you noticing any specific trends in those who are embracing it, a little bit apprehensive?
Yeah, I mean, I think the appetite is there. The amount of inquiries we get around all the AI stuff is huge, but the challenge with it, as you said, hallucinations is one, trust, but security as well. Like, where is my data going? Where are my questions going? Is it going to end up in some training data set for OpenAI? Like, I think it was Samsung, someone using ChatGPT, and their source code or bits of it ended up in the training data and recalled then for everyone else, and you can't get that out once it's in there, right? And so I think that's another one of the big fears we see is I want to know exactly where all this is going, what's happening with it, and what it's putting out, because people need to build that trust and understanding.
Yeah, it keeps coming back to trust, education, learning, and then the right applications. Great. So, Bear, I want to kind of start with you on this one. We've been talking about specific industries. I want to talk a bit about just kind of the tech industry as a whole. We're all here like in San Francisco. We're always in kind of our own bubble. But what would you say are maybe some of the biggest misconceptions around AI that you've seen?
Yeah, you kind of touched on it there. We in this room, the people in SF, in tech, at an AI innovation event, do not represent the market. Like if we think about the customer service space, the biggest density of customer service reps in the US are in Utah, Arizona, South Carolina, Georgia. And I'm sure they're very into AI. I'm sure they also don't see AI billboards on their way to work like we do driving down the 101. So this is going to take a long time to adopt. So I think that's it's a misconception that this is everywhere. It's everywhere for us. Like if we use an analogy of cloud software, like still something like 60% of software spend is on-premise, which for me is crazy. I don't know how on-premise works, but it's still the case. And so this is going to be something, I don't know, cloud's been around for what, 20 years? This is going to be a long, long journey. And back to education, we need to bring people on that journey. It's not going to be just turn it on, it works, people adopt it. That's not how this works. It's not how it works. So we need to get around that misconception and kind of get out of our bubble.
Yeah, sure. I think the other thing for those of us we're using this technology all the time is there's a little bit of a feeling from some, I think, they're like, well, we need GPT-5. That's the thing. We went to the next model. The next model is the one that solves all these problems for us. I think we barely scratched the surface of the existing models of what we can do with them, what we can build with them. And I think as we've seen the costs dropping for all these things and the speed getting faster and faster, it massively changes what you can do, even with the intelligence levels that they have right now. Starting to move some of these products from being reactive, where you ask a question, it gives something back, to proactive, where it can be doing things for you because the cost is low enough and the trust is there in it. So I think that's another one I'm seeing, which is like, we don't need them to be way smarter to be doing even more with them than we are.
I know you wanted to say something, but like on that though, like I guess, is that more like we always want more, we want the next thing, we want the flash, and that's kind of like a very human nature kind of thing. Is it more that, or are you finding that are there certain kind of like key barriers? You mentioned costs, and I think the cost is kind of continuously going towards zero for a lot of these things, but why is there this consistent drive to always have to have the next thing, even when that value is incremental and maybe a little bit less than previous iterations.
I think this technology is still so new, and the pace it's been moving at, we still haven't learned all the ways of doing it. People drop a tip on X saying, oh, you just ask it, say, I'll tip you loads of money and it'll give you a better response or whatever. And people find these weird little angles of doing things. But I think of it as well, like you were talking earlier about how much better they are at making decisions now. And so you try and build a decision tree and get it to kind of work down that. If it takes it a minute to get through each of them, maybe there's 10 questions, 10 minutes, it's too slow for a response. The same intelligence, if it gets 10 times faster, you can get through the whole chain in a minute. Think of the workflows and the complexity you can build that's actually usable at that speed without it being any smarter than it is right now. So I think that's part of it as well. And so people hope the next model is going to bring us that. But the next model is going to be smarter, but probably slower often.
Yeah. On the latency point, and I know we're asking about, what's misconceptions, but I think the latency point is really interesting because actually we found some of the best improvements to our models come from the fastest models that have just enough intelligence that they can get over the hump. And then after that, the latency is really important because if you're sitting there waiting, 5 seconds versus 10 seconds for a response, at least for customer support, that's huge. That makes a huge amount of drop off for both the customer support agents and the end customer too. So 4.0 Mini was maybe one of the best innovations. We were more excited about 4.0 Mini than we were about 4.0. So yeah.
Love that. I always want to keep asking more questions. I'm going to try and keep us on track because got time limits. Barry, this one's to you. Starting to see a lot of disruption. It's going to continue. That makes making a lot of business decisions very difficult. We just talked about adopting an AI model. Like, which model? Should we do it now? Do we invest now? Or is there going to be a better one coming out soon that we should be focused on? How would you think about companies and how they should be thinking about, from like a fundamental level, going about and investing or allocating their resources, time, energy, capital into AI? How should they be maybe thinking about that?
I actually think Intercom is a fantastic use case here, or case study for business school or something on innovator's dilemma. So we made the decision to focus on customer support in October 2022. That was a month before ChatGPT came out. So we had a decision to make. We had hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue with a new technology that was potentially disrupting all of that. People were like, CS was the poster child, still is the poster child for AI. Sam Altman highlighted in a Lex Friedman interview, in the first couple of months, CS is what's going to get disrupted. And in credit to our leadership, they leaned in. They got quick conviction on that this is the future. So that was step one, getting conviction, this is the future. Step two, and kind of answer your question, step two is, all right, what trade-offs are we willing to make? So as I'm sure you can all guess, I said hundreds of millions of dollars. You can imagine now that AI is a portion of that. It is a small portion of it today. It's fast growing, but it's a small portion. Our R&D resources, our vast majority are pointed at AI. That is a bold and hard decision for our leadership to make, and they made it. And so we launched or announced our Fin, which is our AI agent, in March 2023. That was quick and way years ahead of our competitors. So it's making those really, really hard decisions. And it wasn't a slam dunk internally. That is not an easy message to say. It's we're going to invest most of our resources on the minority of our revenue. It was hard, and I can imagine it was hard for our exec team to make that decision. So I'd imagine those discussions are happening all around tech at the moment.
We had a very similar decision to make, and it's interesting because I would say we made many similar decisions to Intercom, had very different implementations. So when ChatGPT was released, our company was around 100 folks, and actually we decided to take a very small but targeted team of 4 people to go and build something out. And the reason why was because we really believe in speed and agility of small teams. And that small team actually ended up building honestly, they built probably too many things we should have rolled them back a little bit and said, hey, focus on a few areas. But that team was so agile because we said, hey, this is an incredibly exciting space. There's going to be some multi-billion-dollar company that is built in this space. Let's figure out what we can do. And we pulled out the YC playbook and said, hey, you're going to go talk to a ton of customers. You're going to go iterate very quickly. And I think we had the nice distribution advantage of being able to talk to a lot of customers immediately. So that, for us at least, was a really good decision.
Love it. I'm gonna, Glenn, get this one to you. Switching gears a bit, when you're looking out at like problems that you face day to day, whether it's like whether at Coda, just in your day-to-day life, are there any ways that you would love to see AI be implemented that you haven't already seen yet to solve some big problems, whether it's massive global problems, small problems here or there, anything that you would just love to see AI tackling that you haven't really seen that happen in yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing for me, or I'm biased because the thing I think most about it is like the longer term planning with it, being able to make decisions, have more context over time to make those decisions and make lots of them in a row, because often that's what our jobs are, you know, the things we're trying to kind of automate away. Some of it is like, I make lots of decisions over a whole week and I need to keep all that context in mind and do a lot of parts of it. And so it needs to be able to be way more able to kind of long-term plan with me. And I think that's one of the things I'm hoping to see more of with this stuff is just a better way of holding all that context and makes those decisions. And we'll do those different things over time. And they're getting there. They're close to that kind of thing already. But yeah.
I mean, if it's outside of the customer support space, because I can talk all about what I want to do in the support space, but outside of the space, I would love to see browser automation. If anyone is here and going to go build an amazing browser automation tool, I think that would be incredibly impactful because we spend so much time, support agents that I've shadowed, they spend so much time clicking between five different tabs, right? It's actually quite hard as a support agent to make sure that you've got the right account pulled open, and hey, like the refund button is on a completely different page, and a lot of these systems are really old. So what the 2010s version of this is build a bunch of APIs, right? So that you can connect systems in a lot better way. And I think now with LLMs, we potentially have the ability to even just skip ahead of the APIs and just get to a place where you might not need APIs anymore. You might just be able to use LLMs to build all of your backend.
I think an interesting thing we're going to see with that is, we all spent years making these REST APIs that'll work with each other. Is now, how are the chatbots going to work with each other? And none of us have really figured that out yet because everyone's building their own. So how do they talk to each other so that we can use those as a way of interacting with these different products? And I don't think anyone's figured that out yet.
It's kind of like the Waymos going back and forth with each other. Yeah.
I love it. I want to talk a bit about business models because one of the things that I've seen a lot online, and I know that we've dealt with at Intercom, is just the kind of disruption that we're seeing in the space around the different types of ways that we charge for things, right? So Barry, I know this is a big part of your world. What have you kind of already been seeing, or what do you expect to see around kind of world of the traditional SaaS business model now in the age of AI?
Yeah. So for folks not in CS, CS customer support software has generally been priced by seat. So for every person who's using software, they are charged X dollars per month for that seat. That's changing. So our AI agent is recharged based on 99 cents for every resolution. So that's does the customer get an answer? That's a resolution that charges you $1 or 99 cents. That's different. It's not an easy calculation to make of how many seats do I give up for this AI agent. And quick side note is that we actually did this internal analysis of what is the cannibalization of our seats, of our customer seats based on AI adoption. And what was weird and needs further analysis is that we saw a positive correlation between seat growth and AI adoption. So say that more plainly, the more AI you used, the more seats you had, which doesn't make sense if intuitively, quickly intuitively. What we suspect is that customers who are more likely to adopt AI tend to be folks who are growing and excited about the future. That's an early hypothesis. We need to dig into it more. But shifting that mindset of value is hard. So we are charging per resolution, which is essentially work. We're charging for work as opposed to a seat. And there's a public company called NICE, N-I-C-E. They're contact center software, and they recently put out a really nice slide that showed. So they sell their software to very, very big companies. So I'm going to give some big numbers, but they're, just think of their customer base as big contact centers. They did a before and after cost per customer, before and after AI. And so their labor spend before AI was $50 million per customer. Their software spend was 3. So that's, 53 million. After AI, their software spend went from 3 to 4.5. So that's a 50% increase. So you can imagine a buyer being like, what the hell am I doing? I'm not paying 50% more. But their labor spend went down to 37.5 million. So that's a net of 11 million less. But just getting that message across is really hard. Like it's perceived as I'm spending 50% more in software rather than here is some value I'm saving. So it's a hard conversation. And like when we think traditionally in Intercom thought traditionally about TAM, we always thought about software TAM. And that's the amount of money being spent on CS software. But do we now start to have to think about TAM in a different way? Like what is the amount of money that is being spent on customer service salaries? Is that part of our TAM? And that's a, it's not a easy question to answer. It's not even an easy question to ask. So that's some of the business model stuff that we're seeing.
We see the exact same thing, actually. Your analysis of like the customers who are most interested in purchasing AI, they're the ones who are growing the fastest. It's either that or they're the customers who really, really need to cut headcount and are laying. It's very bimodal, which is surprising to me. But what we found with the customers who are growing very quickly is our pitch to them is actually more of a scale. You don't want, like most people when they're scaling really quickly, you don't want to just throw headcount at solving a problem. And that's the traditional way of solving problems. And they are really, really excited to use AI solutions to prevent that headcount growth from ballooning to a giant number. And now that efficiency is such a big thing for venture capitalists, that's a really, really key metric that they're looking at. And then there are the other folks who our pitch to them is completely different, which is I want to cut headcount and I want to figure out where, how to save money. And I think those are the two modes that we're kind of seeing from our customer base.
You have any commentary on that one?
I mean, from the business model side as well, one of the challenges is this is not a cheap technology. I mean, lots of the features as a product manager I design, I don't normally have to worry about the cost that much every now and then. But this you really do. And so that's a challenge when it comes to seat pricing, because there's a big difference between what one person uses and another. And you can get a lot of value out of using it more and more and more. And how do you tie that to value? Like not everything that's expensive to use AI for is the most valuable thing you'll do with it. So that's definitely been a challenge, I think, is like how do you have a usage-based model that ties to value in some way?
Yeah, I've heard pricing is pretty difficult. Love it. Glenn, that's a pretty good segue. Ask this one for you. Love to hear just maybe some of the ways now, but also how you envision the future AI changing the way that R&D teams, engineering teams actually design, build, and ship software. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's probably the weirdest technology I've ever worked with, because most of the time you kind of know what you want to build, and you kind of work backwards to what you're going to do. And there's so much of AI, it's like, well, could it do that? Maybe. And you actually have to go right to prototyping, designing and all that stuff up front, because you don't know if it can do it. We have a feature in Coda where AI can comment on your doc for you, read your doc, and it adds comments to you like a teammate would. And that came from an idea, but we started by saying, I don't even know if it can do this. Is it good at this? And we had to go straight to prototyping, and we couldn't start with any other way of doing it. And then you have to deal with this non-deterministic product that can do all kinds of things. So a lot of work then goes on how you evaluate it, testing all these different scenarios, way more than a much simpler product you might build where you know what the input and the output's going to be, and you can't really do much in between. So it really changes the R&D process because you are straight into development and straight into edge cases, whereas normally you're starting from the like perfect scenarios and all the design layers. That it doesn't make sense to do that if you don't know if it can do it.
Yeah, I think R&D, I mean, engineering, I think will definitely change, though maybe not as much as the Twitter folks will have you believe. Has anyone used GitHub Copilot or Cursor? Seems like quite a few people in the room, and I think it definitely changes your workflow, but you still need to be a really good engineer in order to use it well, right? You're not going to go. I remember like a year ago, people were talking about, are we never going to have engineers again? And actually, again, it feels like one of those really bimodal things where actually the senior engineers are going to do a lot better. The people who can understand how to go and say, this is what I want to build, go build this. Instead of like literally writing the code, you're now going to do a little bit more of prompting what the code should be written as and testing, hey, this is a weird color choice on my button, or hey, this schema makes no sense given that I have this thing in some other file. And there's a lot of things in Cursor that just don't really work yet. For example, multi-file editing. That's something that's so hard right now still for LLMs to do. And hopefully that'll change in a little bit, but still not quite there. I kind of view it as, the days when you had Emacs and Vim and that was your editor. And then you finally get to IntelliJ VS Code where you just like really increase the speed of your workflow and the productivity of each engineer. I think it's going to be that, but really magnified. But it's not, I don't think it's getting rid of engineers anytime soon, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's contextual, right? There's a big difference between somebody at a larger company where your decision to work on something is going to have like downstream impacts on like maybe part of your tech debt or like not working on something else versus somebody kind of like hacking in their basement, working on something, a new idea, getting from 0 to 1. There's also the idea that the building and coding is effectively becoming a bit more commoditized than it has been before because more people can do it, which means that more effort needing to be put into the user experience, the flow, the added value that comes from that. And so I think we're going to see this on the kind of like practical implementation and development of products, but also on all the other facets that it touches, from thoughtful design to accessibility, all these other aspects that before it's like as long as your product worked and did a thing, it was okay. But now it's more about how it looks, right? Or how does it feel using it? Great. I'm just being cognizant of time. I want to talk a bit more, like we talked through some of these now, so maybe we'll get to the question about kind of skill sets, and we can just kind of, Barry, I'll start with you, we can go around. But as AI becomes more ingrained in every kind of aspect of different jobs, whether it's technology, design, customer service, whatever, what are some of the skills that you think are going to be in the highest demand for people working in the tech industry, maybe specifically within the software industry as opposed to like hard tech, but whether it's hard or soft skills, what do you think are going to be kind of the most in demand? And Barry, start with you.
Yeah, I think 3 things come to mind here. There's an adage, I think the guy's name is Jerry Weinberg, I might be getting that wrong, but that every problem's a people problem. That's not going away. Every problem continues to be a people problem, and it's like getting people to do things, not in a mandated fashion, but like influence. AI does not really help that, so that's not going away. So being able to be a great collaborator is just such a skill that's going to be valuable forever, in my opinion. The second one is critical thinking. There's going to be a lot of data created and pieces created, and like understanding like what is real, I think is a valuable thing. I mean, that's fairly obvious. And the third, I think, is brand. After maybe like the Copilot use case, probably the second, and after customer support, the next one is like the next use case in SaaS has been, I think, creating marketing content. And I think there's a danger that it produces a plethora of sameness and bland brands that, you could argue that existed before. AI SaaS brands just being very samey. But being able to, like, companies have an opportunity, a real opportunity to stand out by putting thought into their brand, not using AI generated brands. Like if you look at this image on the screen right here, we launched that in April, I think it was. And a lot of comments were like, what was the prompt to create that image? That's on our homepage. And it wasn't. That was like our VP of design found an artist that he really, really liked and, walked through many iterations to get to that. That is a brand that now stands out. It is not a single color on the website. It is a very distinct thing. And I think that kind of behavior and action and boldness is going to become more and more important as it is easier and easier to become same.
Yeah, I'd echo all of those things. I'd say the other area that I think will be very helpful to most people is prompting, both in the literal sense and the meta sense, right? In order to write a good prompt, you need to be really specific. You need to have particular actions that you're going to ask an LLM or a person to do, right? And all of the things that make a good manager. Actually, it's the same as being a good prompter, right? You go and you're trying to tell someone to do something in a specific way. It might fight you, right? It might try to do something in a completely different, wild way that you don't want it to do. And you have to go back and you have to iterate and be a little bit better about that. So I think actually that skill of prompting, writing a lot of prompts and writing actually more than just prompts, just being able to communicate effectively with someone in a very specific way, that's going to be super important regardless of anything else.
Yeah, all of those. And I'll add, if you're building AI products, I think knowing how to evaluate them becomes just as important, because there are so many ways people can break it intentionally or not. There's so many things it's going to do that you don't expect it to do. And so you've got to be really good at understanding how to evaluate it. And it's really easy to write 100 prompts and they all work. And you're like, great, this thing works 100% of the time, until someone does something that wasn't in that list you had. And like being really good at coming up with those corpuses is like massively important for this.
All fantastic. Plus one to the sameness comment. As somebody working in marketing, you see that a lot. But yeah, the soft skills, communication, thoughtful awareness of what you're building and why. I think it's staying up with technology is important, but you're never going to not need to be a thoughtful, discerning, like clear, concise, well-spoken person. These are all good things to have. So great. So we're going to open it up for questions now. I believe Becky and there's Lauren. We are going to go. We're going to hand out some mics. So let's see here. Yeah, we'll give these out, and then yeah, okay, great. And so we got some questions already. So we'll come give you the mic, and then you can ask your question, and then we'll pass a couple of these around up here to answer. If you know who you want to ask it to, let us know. If not, we can just randomly pick somebody. Becky, you want to go? You can go after that person goes. But yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone, for that amazing talk. I feel like I learned so much as someone who's new to this AI space. But I wanted to, I love the comment that Barry made about like one of the AI companies that he really looked up to. I believe it was NICE, you said? NIC. Oh, NIC, gotcha. So I just wanted to echo that throughout the entire panel. And I was curious, like, what are some of the AI companies that you guys personally admire that are really shaping and pushing the limits of what current AI models can do, as well as like the business model of SaaS in general?
I mean, I'll ignore all the foundation model companies because they're kind of OpenAI and Anthropic are kind of obvious. I think the ones that I find most interesting at the moment, the people that aren't working in the text space, so people like Figma who are trying to like make images happen, and not just, a fancy, can you make a dog riding a skateboard, but can you help design a UI? And that's like such a different problem to be solving for AI. And so I think they're one I think is really interesting, that type of problem they're trying to solve.
I think if you're the types of companies, I mean, Perplexity is one of one of those that I think has a really great UI. I actually really admire Intercom. The products, especially the branding. I think all of the things that Intercom is doing is really cool. There's a ton of smaller companies out there too, especially in the support space. There's this company called Sierra. They're founded by an ex CEO, co-CEO of Salesforce, Brett Taylor, and they're doing some really cool stuff as well. So I don't think there's a dearth at all of really interesting AI companies.
I'll just add one to that, more on the foundational level, not Croc with a K, Croc with a Q. The kind of like chips that they're building, a lot of what they're doing around that is really cool. And just to echo, I think there's a lot of companies that are not necessarily being pioneers in the underlying technology or LLMs, but they're using it in very thoughtful ways and solving real problems. And I think that's, I don't know, to me, it's sometimes as somebody who's not on the technical side, just as important.
Hi, I have a question for John at Assembled. So you mentioned that you are encountering you're feeling the web agents is very crappy to use in your workflow. So I was building with web agents, and there's a benchmark called Web Arena, and a similar company called ServiceNow has an open source version browser gem that does the web agents. So general question is, what do you think is the best way to approach web agent problems, and what's the best solution that Assembled is using, if that can be saying? And second question, to be more specific, is that what's your take on ServiceNow's browser gem approach to take the web agent question, expanding the action space per se?
Yeah, whoa, that's a multifaceted question. That's a good question. I think our approach so far, I mean, AI agents, I think, is where everyone's heading. That's clearly where you get the best results, and it's where you can get really targeted abilities to get high quality answers. The downside is I don't think I've seen an incredibly I don't think I've vetted and seen okay, this particular framework is the ideal framework. There's LangChain out there, but also LangChain is really just a series of prompts that are chained together, right? It's nothing more than that, and nothing that I've seen is really anything other than that. I think the systems that do help are, how do you make sure that you put all of these workflows and kind of agentic steps into succession in a neat, consistent way. That I think is actually quite valuable, because as you start building these things out, you'll see, I mean, there's so much complexity, and there's so many places that you can get things wrong, and there's one prompt somewhere very high up in your workflow can go wrong. So I think being able to actually have consistency and the ability to see what's going wrong, that helps a lot. I'm not really familiar with ServiceNow's workflows and what they're building, so I don't know if I can comment too much on that. But I really do. I think there actually are quite a few great people building browser automation. So yeah.
Yeah. Hi, I have a question for all of you guys. I'm wondering, what are the reasons why some of your clients are dropping? Is there a way for you to identify that this company is not doing those things and they're about to drop? And what are you doing to retain them? Thank you.
I can answer part of that from the Intercom perspective. Obviously, there's a lot of things that could go wrong with any kind of implementation, but kind of putting a lot of that aside, some of the key things are just the same across the board for any software. So getting clear leadership buy-in, aligning incentives, making sure that you're buying the right tool for the right job, that's still important. But the data that you feed in, and maybe Glenn can talk about this, but the information that you're feeding into one of these large language models, whatever tool it is that you're using is important. It needs to be accurate and up to date. So if you're in the customer service world and you're going to have people interacting with your product and asking it questions, you have to feed it a source of data. And if you don't have accurate or up-to-date information, or if it's not robust enough, then no matter how good your AI model, your AI agent is that you've built, it's not going to be able to provide an accurate answer. And at the end of the day, that's going to be what an individual sees. The person that's interacting with that is going to be upset, and they're not going to see their customer satisfaction is going to drop, right? They're not going to see an increased resolution rate. They're not going to get value from the product, and then they're going to probably churn off of it. And so there's a lot of education that has to happen around best practices for not only implementing and how to use the tool, but how to make sure that it's fed with the right information, accurate, kept up to date. So there's a strong level of like education that has to happen. And we find that the companies that do that very well, that are thoughtful about that and that roll it out incrementally and really care, they have very, very high rates of success. And then they quickly go on to adopt it even more and more. And the ones that kind of try and just do it quickly or they don't think through it are the ones that don't see success and end up kind of churning off.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think when it comes to usage of AI products and where people drop off the most, I think like, education's a big part of it, because I think these things are so versatile. But if the first thing you type into it is something it can't answer, you're like, well, this isn't very good. Whereas the people that know how to use it, they can get a lot out of it. And so I think most of what I've seen when it comes to usage and people dropping off or not getting value out of the product is because we've not done a good enough job of educating them and guiding them towards things it does well. Because it's really easy with these very open things to try things that just don't work well at all.
Another question?
I'd love to go back to the business model question, because I feel like that's what a lot of startups are thinking about right now. So you laid out this idea or this process of you're going from cost per seat to cost per resolution. So if you push this to the asymptote, you have cost per resolution, which will be very much tied to the cost of running an LLM, cost per inference, cost per query, whatever it is. What does the gross margin of that look like? Because I don't know if that looks like a 80, 90% SaaS margin company anymore.
The short answer is initially not as good as it is today. So like obviously, so we launched this whenever, let's say, I think it was July last year, July 2020. And obviously the cost of LLMs was higher then. And we just kind of predicted that of like, things are going to get cheaper, and we needed, I can't remember what our initial price, we actually launched at a slightly higher price. I can't remember what it was, but it was a weird number. It wasn't like a nice number, like 99 cents. It was, I'm making something up, but like $1.60 or something. And that built in a healthy margin at the time. But it wasn't resonating. First of all, like it's a weird number. But we're also like, this is going to get cheaper. We've learned this lesson before on like a million different ways that things are going to get cheaper. And also, I am not technical, so I'm going to butcher this, but like we don't use the best and most expensive model for everything. And it kind of relates to some of the stuff that John was saying earlier. We use the best and most expensive models. I'm not sure if those two things are the same thing. We don't use the best, like most accurate model for everything. We use that when it matters. And there's some stuff in the back end that doesn't need to use that highest quality answer. And I'm going to stop there because I'm going to get myself in trouble from a technical perspective. But that's so. I think the takeaways are from a cost perspective, it's going to get cheaper. There's also an element of it's not a loss leader, but like we know that if people adopt Fin, there's lots of other stuff that we sell them as well. Like it's, they're not just buying Fin, they're also buying seats. We have other products as well. This is not a sales pitch, but we have other products that they can purchase. So it's not the business model makes sense, I suppose, is what I'm getting at.
Thank you.
I'd say the other thing on the business model is that there actually is real ROI that we provide, and I think like the counterfactual, which I've actually seen quite a few companies trying to do this, is they get their internal team, internal engineering team, to try to build out systems to make their customer support team more efficient. And to me, it's bonkers, absolutely bonkers. You're going to get your internal engineering team that you took, that's really, really hard to recruit. Like 5 engineers is incredibly expensive, by the way. It's like far more than the contracts that we have. And you're going to get them to work on this internal support team thing that maybe in a year and a half, they're just going to like forget about, because it's a hot thing right now, but they're not going to maintain it. It's a bonkers proposition. I mean, I'm very biased, but to me, I don't think that's a good use of your time or money or engineering talent.
Good one over there. Yep.
Name is TY. I'm with Micro Ventures. Thank you so much for your conversation there. Just a follow-up question with the previous question about business model and pricing model. Would we see a shift towards value-based pricing across the industry? Question one. Two is like, if we're going to get there, what are some of the things that needs to happen apart from, say, customer education?
Just making sure I heard the question correctly. So the first question was, are we moving to value-based pricing?
Yes, across the industry, like we did like 10 years ago into like per seat SaaS pricing. We see a shift towards value-based pricing.
I think so. Like we're no longer assigning value to that was going to be a bad sentence. I was going to say no longer assigning value to humans. That's not what I mean. We're not like directly correlating person in a seat equals this value. It's a 24/7 thing, and we're like, when that is doing work, Intercom should be realizing some of the value that's providing to our customers. Are we going to see that throughout the industry? Yes, I think so. I think one of the folks in here was like developing a inbound sales, Matthias here actually, inbound sales AI product. And I can imagine, again, that's not going to be a seat-based model. That's going to be something on like the performance number of S1s. I'm totally assuming your business model is like number of S1s it creates or something like that. It's going to be very correlated to the value that it produces. And again, value-based pricing is not new. In fact, the pricing model before our current one was called value-based pricing. Anyway, so the short answer to that one is yes. Second part of your question
How do we get there? Like apart from customer education, like what are some of the things that startups should do to get there?
To get to use
Value-based pricing.
Value-based pricing. I think it's a matter of communicating the value, right? Like it's I've spoken about it of the mind shift change that we are trying to force is the wrong word. We're trying to communicate and like shifting that over to here's the value, but it's a matter of like you then need to put a number on the value that you're providing. Like we need to tell our customers that the value of a resolution is more than 99 cents. We will charge you 99 cents. So whatever other industry we're in, we need to prove, or you need to prove that whatever you're charging for it is less than the cost to the customer. So it is like, it's in the title, like show the value and very clearly like have a number, have a calculator, have all that stuff on your website of here's the cost you're charging today, and let's convert that to the new world. And, easy peasy decision, buy my software.
And so I think we have like maybe time for one more. I know we went a bit over, but we'll extend the break a little bit. But like one more question on this side, I believe.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me okay? First of all, thanks for the insightful presentation. It's really, really good. The question that I had was about efficiency. You talked a little bit earlier in the presentation about the trade-off between, how big is the model and latency. Have you tried experimenting with models that are essentially mini models rather than larger models to overcome that problem? And to what extent has the juice been worth the squeeze operationally as you've experimented with that? And then the second part to the question, I think, is probably more targeted to John, which is you started off with this kind of tiger team of 5 people experimenting. How big has that team grown now? Is it possible to maintain a small team and be lean as you're driving innovation initiatives for AI, or did it just spiral because you needed all of the operation, DevOps, and everything that goes along with the operations and apparatus of your AI growth?
Man, good questions. I think for sure there's definitely a very useful, we've definitely experimented with using smaller models or different models, and it's definitely something I think you should do. You don't want to use the most expensive, slowest model for everything. And what we have found is for certain tasks, for example, summarization, text extraction, kind of sentiment analysis, you actually want really fast, low latency, very low cost responses, and those small models do just fine. And in fact, if you fine tune a llama model, it's like even better probably, or as good as a 4.0 model. That said, we actually haven't we've spent some time trying to get really good gains out of fine tuning. And it's quite hard because most of the time our customers, they care a lot about security. And I'm sure everyone here's customers care about security. So we're not training a giant model. It's a customer specific model. And when you have that, it means getting the training data right for your fine-tuned model is really imperative. And getting training data still, to me, is a human job, because it's just, there's so many intricate things that we haven't been able to understand about what quality of responses looks like. So yeah.
Yeah, I think similar. I think our general approach has been start with a bigger, versatile model, make a versatile surface for people to use it in, see what people use it for. They use it for summarization, whatever they use it for. Now we can take that, productize it with a much smaller model and get efficiency gains that way, and it'd be faster for them, probably better for them. But we haven't spent loads of time trying to get cost efficiencies for a lot of it. It's like the market moves so quickly, most of it's just happened organically without having to really try. But yeah.
Where we found actually good results is in making our RAG pipeline better, because we found that search is, it's the hardest thing, and it's the thing, if you don't have the right documents being pulled into your model, you're just never going to get the right answer. And so everything that we did in search, I would do again, and I would probably do it sooner because there's a lot of stuff that you can do to make your search better. To your question of how big is our team now, that's a great question. We're right now around 10 or 11 on that particular team. So we're trying to grow it relatively slowly, because most people here who have seen like fast growth startups have seen the problems that come when you double or triple or quadruple over the years. And culture and team bonding is really important. I think one of the ways that we've been able to stay relatively small and so lean is we're basically all in San Francisco. We're in 5 days a week. And that has really helped us be able to communicate in a fast manner. Now, that selects a lot of people out from the team, but we don't need that many people. We're like hiring 1 or 2 engineers at a time.